unleashing female power.
Being a disruptor.
I'm always constantly telling the truth.
I love
art. That's all her life.
She's alive and female.
Being a woman, what it meant.
Prove him wrong.
Girls run the world.
We're rocking the place.
Welcome to the Art Pod. I'm your host, Carolina, and I'll be your guide through this Pandora's box. Strap yourselves in for a journey through the art world where we bring you candid conversations, untold stories, uncover industry secrets, and celebrate the women who are shaping its future. Because in the Art Pod, the spotlight is always on the girls. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Art Pod. My guest today is Allison Rudnick. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So a little bit about Allison. Allison is the Associate Curator in the Department of Drawings and Prints at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Her recent exhibitions include Art for the Millions, American Culture and Politics in the 1930s, which was on view in 2023, and The Art of the Literary Poster, works from the Leonard A. Lauder collection, which was on view in 2024. She has published and presented widely on modern and contemporary printmaking practices and visual culture. She holds a Master of Philosophy from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York, where she is a PhD candidate. Okay, so I kind of want to start the conversation with your current position at the Met, which is Associate Curator in the Department of Drawings and Prints. But originally you started, well, if we go way back, you started as an intern at the Met,
Yes.
and then you progressed to being a research assistant, then an assistant curator and associate curator.
Correct.
But let's start with your today. So what are some of your responsibilities and kind of what does a day-to-day look like for you?
Sure. So as Associate Curator in Drawings and Prints at the Met, I oversee what we call the Ephemera and Visual Culture Collection. And if you don't know what that means, that's normal. It's a very kind of unusual role. Not many museums have roles like that. So in the Drawings and Prints department, which is one of 17 curatorial departments at the Met.
Wow.
It's huge. I'm one of several curators in Drawings and Prints, and every curator in the department oversees a specific section of our collection. And we happen to have hundreds of thousands of items of what we call ephemera. So, we all know the word ephemeral, which indicates something that's not meant to last. Mm-hmm. That's what ephemera is. And so it includes any kind of printed material that wasn't really meant to be a work of art. So advertising material like posters, postcards, trade cards, cigar bands, menus. We have all of
literally
this,
everything.
Baseball cards. We have, it's everything. We have all of this material in the collection at the Met, surprisingly enough. And my job is to oversee that collection, to build an expertise on this kind of material, to kind of keep up with the scholarship on that material, and to essentially present the material to the public in a way that kind of is meaningful and contextualizes this work so that the audiences can appreciate something about it, learn something new from it. So my responsibilities range from the more kind of obvious, like organizing exhibitions and making acquisitions, so selecting which works should join the collection, to the sometimes not so obvious. I manage one staff member, a collections manager. I manage a volunteer who catalogs part of our ephemera collection. I sit on the internship committee that serves the whole museum. I serve on other kind of advisory and curatorial committees that kind of crop up as needed. So that's kind of, that basically encompasses what I do. And my day-to-day can look different depending on what I'm working on at the moment. So the literary poster exhibition I organized just closed 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
And Art for the Millions was on view directly before that. So I spent a good chunk of time while those exhibitions were up, giving tours, doing publicity for the shows, giving talks and lectures. So it was I was not at my desk as much as I usually am.
Okay.
Which was great. I'm talking to the public. I'm having conversations about the exhibitions. But now that the shows are over, my day will look entirely different. It looks more like a kind of office job. I'm at my desk writing emails, doing research, spend some time in the library. And something I really like about the job is that it does look different. There's kind of ebbs and flows, and depending on the season, in a way, it can look totally different.
Yeah. No, that sounds exciting. So I kind of wanted to ask you, how does an exhibition come to fruition, start to finish for you? Like, where do you start with the concept?
Yeah. There's so many different ways to answer that question, because I think every exhibition starts off differently. I'll say, in my experience for Art for the Millions, that started that was kind of inspired by work I did and I'm continuing to do in school as a PhD candidate at the CUNY Grad Center. So in my academic life, I'm very interested in and I'm doing research on the 1930s in the United States. And because I've had this interest and have seen so many parallels between my academic research and what we have in the collection at the Met, I pitched an exhibition about this topic. Of course, I kind of molded it to make it seem less like an academic paper and more, of course, like something that, was object-based and that the public would be interested in. And it was actually kind of fun to transition between those two things. So that was the genesis of that show. For the poster exhibition, which featured posters all from Leonard A. Lauder's collection, works that he's donated to the Met over 40 or so years. That was a kind of idea that some of us at the Met have been thinking about for some time, because we've had this collection for so long. The first batch of posters came into the museum in 1984.
Wow.
Predates my time, obviously, at the Met. And so there's been a lot of work done on this collection in terms of research and building it. And there was a show in 1987 on this collection. And so that it wasn't something that came out of, it came out of museum work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it seemed like a good time to, really celebrate the collection. And so that came out of kind of conversations with some of my colleagues and those who work closely with Mr. Lauder. I'm talking about potentially pitching an exhibition with a colleague, who works in a different department, about an acquisition that we're working on. There's so many different ways that exhibition ideas can come to the fore.
So for the Lauder collection, for example, you already knew what you kind of had in the collection. You wanted to structure that exhibition around that. For Art for the Millions, for example, does that start with a concept and then you go into the archive and see what you guys have?
It's, I would say, a little more like not quite so black and white. I think a lot of my academic interests in this topic actually stemmed from learning more about the collection.
Okay.
And as I continued to do research for my PhD, I kept looking back at the Met's collection and going, oh, this would make a great show.
Yeah.
And no one has looked at these artists in decades or whatever, the whatever I was looking at that time, whatever ideas came to mind. So it was more of a back and forth. Rarely, at least in my experience, do I take objects and fit them into a concept I already have. I kind of personally think that that's usually not super successful. I feel like the ideas should stem from looking at the objects, studying the objects, close looking, but then thinking about the context in which they were made, things like that. So that's how my brain works. That's how my approach to my work usually goes.
Okay, fair. In doing all of this and planning all these exhibitions, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you have come across in your field?
Yeah. Some of the biggest challenges.
I feel like there are many.
There are many. It's hard.
It's hard.
It's wonderful and amazing work, and it's hard work too. I'll just say writing is really hard.
Do you get writer's block?
Oh my God, all the time.
Okay.
All the time. Are you kidding? I'm the worst procrastinator. I shouldn't say that.
No, me too.
And it's not that I'm not thinking about things, and that, it's not like I'm coming to something at the last moment, but I stress until the last moment about it, and then the ideas come. Of course, that's how it works. You have to be stressed, I feel like.
That's when the greatest things happen.
Yes. It's like kind of unfair that way, but I always find writing to be excruciating and fulfilling at the same time. I feel like and I'm sure it's something most people, most
I
people
can definitely relate,
right? It's like love-hate relationship with it. So when writing specifically for like the exhibition catalogs, which is, deeply researched text, and you're thinking both about, obviously making sure that information you're presenting is accurate, is interesting, is well researched, but also you're thinking too about like the tone and the audience. And you don't learn in school how to write an exhibition catalog, how to write for that audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
You learn academic writing, and it's a very different kind of writing. I like this kind of writing a lot, but yeah, it's just like you get in your head. That's a challenge for sure. But there's so many things. I mean, when you're making loan requests and from other institutions or private collectors, and you don't get an answer right away, and you're in limbo, or they reject it, and then you have to go back to the drawing board about what kind of objects you end up selecting for your show. There's a lot that's not in your control, and so, and I'm still fairly new to this. Art for the Millions was my first exhibition to include loans. I've only in the past done exhibition shows. So I think one of the challenging things for me with that exhibition in particular was exactly that, was realizing that the exhibition that I had in my mind from the get-go might not look like that in the end, because there are things that I just couldn't control. And so learning to like go with the flow and take advantage of that flexibility and go, oh, well, maybe there's an opportunity there, and not be such a perfectionist about it.
That's like my worst nightmare.
It was awful. It ended up being fine, but it was a challenge for sure.
Okay. So obviously, when considering loans, and maybe most people don't know this except for, art world insiders, loans can take a really long time. And museums tend to think about exhibitions very much in advance. How do you go about like sourcing your loans? Is it through research where you like something pops up for you and you're like, okay, this museum has it, I want it for me, and then how do you begin to develop that relationship?
It was for Art for the Millions, mostly through research. The exhibition included a range of media, so not just painting and sculpture, but also like prints and industrial material or industrial objects, deck arts. So in some cases there was like, that one painting. There was a painting by Alice Neal that I was dying to have from another institution. And that felt like my loan request was rejected because
who would reject the Met? If they came to me and they're like, I will give them everything.
It wasn't anything against the Met. It was already, slated for being included in another exhibition, which I understood, of course. But then, when it came to prints where you have multiple impressions, oftentimes, I requested a particular print from one of the Smithsonian museums in DC, and it wasn't available. And so I asked another institution for the exact same print. And so it depends there's so many factors at play, which I hadn't really considered before embarking on this. So sometimes, more flexibility than in other instances, but through research, that's certainly I would say the biggest way I, came across objects that I wanted for the show. And a lot of ideas also came from conversations with colleagues within the museum, colleagues at other institutions who said, oh, we have this great work from the 1930s that hasn't been cataloged, isn't on our website. No one knows about it. You should come take a look at it. I realized that the more I talked to people about the show, the more people came to me with their generosity and their ideas, and that really helped shape it. You realize like this is an idea I feel like that sprung from my head, but ended up being very much shaped by so many other participants. And so that's really how the loans came about.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine like you're doing this exhibition, you're talking to somebody about it, and they're like, "Hey, we have this work that no one has seen before. We think it's perfect." Like that's like
Yes.
kismet.
Oh my God. Yes. It was, and it really, like, there were things in 30 show where I was just like, I didn't know that existed before I started doing this. And it's perfect, you
Yeah.
know, and it's surprising and it's fun for people to see things they
Mhm.
hadn't seen before, you know? So.
Speaking about all of this, what's the most rewarding thing about your
Mm,
job?
ugh, that's a hard one too, because there's so many rewarding things. I feel so lucky.
Is it seeing like the exhibition actually live for the first
That's the
time?
best. That's the best. I've only had that experience a few times, and
Mhm.
it does, yeah, it's very fulfilling. I mean, it's like nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh my God, there it is. You know, you feel very like exposed and
Yeah.
vulnerable. Like, oh, now
'Cause
people
it's
are
your
gonna see
idea
this
out
thing
there.
that I've been working on for 3 years.
Yeah.
But it's such a joy to see people in the exhibitions you've developed, reading your labels, looking at the works you put together, and just feeling, it just feels like an immense responsibility to ensure that you've like crafted a story through an exhibition for the public that is one that is like kind of does service to and honors the artists and the works,
Mhm.
you know? And if you feel like you did that right, or there's something that goes right about that, it's really rewarding. I love the people I work with.
Okay.
I do. I have amazing colleagues, so I feel really lucky in that regard. And being in the drawings and prints department in particular means that all of our works, the entire collection in our department is on site. So I can literally like turn the corner from my office and go see anything in our collection. And works on paper tend to be small and portable. And so you can just, pull boxes,
Yeah.
look through the collection very easily. So having that kind of close proximity to the collection, to the art is awesome. I love that part.
Yeah, I can imagine just whatever you want to see, it's like right there
That's
at
right.
your fingertips.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you also do acquisitions for the Met.
Yes.
When you do acquisitions, what are some of the things that you're looking for in an artwork that you want to acquire for the museum?
Yeah, that's a good question. Doing acquisitions for an ephemera collection is there's like no,
Yeah,
there are not many models for it.
Yeah.
So I still feel like sometimes I'm like, asking myself a lot of questions and kind of charting new territory in some sense, which can be a little nerve-wracking, but also like, really great too. So from the collection I oversee, the things I think about are, what are the gaps in the collection? I mean, there's a million, like,
Yeah, of
ephemera
course.
could be almost anything.
Yeah.
But what are like the meaningful gaps? What are the gaps that I feel like we should look to fill? So for example, thinking about artist-made posters and what are the moments over the course of the 20th century, for example, where like posters and other ephemera by artists, there's like a moment for that where they were really important in certain kind of artistic communities. Like let's say with the AIDS epidemic in the 1980s, there were a lot of artists who took to ephemera to tell the public and spread word about this, the situation, whatever. So, do we have good representation of that in the collection or not? And if not, then I kind of go out and start looking for examples. And when I'm thinking about particular works, I look at condition. We have a fantastic paper conservation department. They can do wonders to a work of art, but sometimes works are just in such bad shape that they just can't be shown. So I'm often in touch with colleagues in that department when making acquisitions. Like, can this be saved if it's in bad condition or is it hopeless? I think about, working with prints, like you could have 50 different versions of one poster or one print. What is what impression should we,
Mhm.
if we have that choice, what impression should we pick? Is it better to pick one in pristine condition? Is it better to pick an earlier one? I mean, an example is I recently collected work by the Gorilla Girls,
Oh, I
and the
love them.
original, they're the best. And the original one that they made of this particular poster was in 1989, and then they reissued it several times over the course of the next few decades. And so even though you could get a really great condition, bright, punchy example of this poster from 2014, to me it seemed more appropriate to get the 1989 version because that was the original. So you're thinking about all sorts of things. What story do I want to tell with this? Can I show it? Will it crumble in the frame?
Yeah. That's the thing about ephemeral work. You got to be careful.
Yeah.
Very fragile.
Sometimes too, like we'll bring posters in that have folds in them and we'll keep the folds instead of flattening it because that's part of the story of the object too. So there's like, these are all questions that I know now to ask because of there's people who have been doing this kind of work for many, many, many years, and I've learned from them. And it just really takes like experience. I mean, when I first started making acquisitions, I just was like, I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah.
But you start to learn the dealers and the auction houses that, specialize in these things. And then you build networks of, collectors. And it's all about just having conversations with people who can point you to things that are available and help you, guide you to, the good stuff.
Yeah. I can imagine. So let's talk a little bit about your trajectory at the Met. Can you kind of walk us through from when you started to when you got here, kind of how your role grew and differed throughout the different phases? Just give us kind of like an idea of how you can progress within an institution.
Sure. So I started at the Met as an intern right after I graduated from college, the summer of 2009. And the story I always tell people is that we were, on our internship applications, asked to list our like top 2 or 3 departments that we wanted to work in. And I didn't put drawings and prints on my application at all, anywhere, because I was like, who wants to work in drawings and prints? I'll be honest. I was like 22. I'm not, that wasn't what I was into.
Right.
And then I got placed in drawings and prints and I was like, what? And now I work there and I absolutely love it. So it's like a lesson, I guess.
It's true.
Keep an open mind.
Exactly.
Anyway, so I was placed in drawings and prints, and my internship supervisor was the curator of modern and contemporary prints at the time, Samantha Rippner. And she became a mentor. And after the internship ended, we stayed in touch. And I came back to the Met for a part-time internship over the summer of 2012. I think I was there like 2 days a week, just helping her out on an exhibition. And at the end of the summer, I had another great job, but I remember she was like, I know you have a job, but we are looking for a research assistant to continue work on this exhibition. If you know of anyone who might be interested.
Like
and I was
me.
like, me, I'd be interested, of course. So I was hired for that position. So I was a research assistant working 2 days a week, beginning, I think, like October 2012 for about 3 years when I was doing coursework in grad school. And then a colleague in my department who was what we called then the study room curator, I think she was an associate curator at the time, she got promoted to a different position. And so her position opened up. And so in 2015, I applied to and was hired to take over for her position. So my title was assistant curator, and I oversaw the drawings and prints study room. And I did that up until I went on maternity leave in, like, when was my son born? In June 2022. And then when I came back from maternity leave, I moved out of the study room. I still kept the same title. I was associate curator at that point, but my responsibilities changed. So it was a kind of organic shift out of the study room and into really focusing on the ephemera collection.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in total, how many years have you been at the Met now? Minus the internship.
I'm like, yeah. So I guess, if you count the part-time work as a research research assistant, 2012 to 2024, so 12 years.
Wow,
Yeah,
incredible.
Yeah.
You really do love the prints and drawings department. I mean, one of my questions was going to be why this department, but then you kind of just landed by accident there, and then you fell in love with it and you ended up staying.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I don't want to like jump the gun here, but one piece of advice I always give people who ask we're getting into the field is just to keep an open mind.
Yeah.
Because I knew nothing about printmaking when I started my career. And then I learned about it, and it still took a while for me to really like get an interest in it. I think part of why I love it is because I want other people to understand. I know what it's like to not love it right away.
Yeah.
And I want to get people to love it the way I do.
Yeah. I can relate because I used to obviously I come from a background of studying art history. I hated studying photography and prints because I'm just like, it's just whatever. It didn't like do anything for me until my undergrad professor made me write my final thesis on D&R bis. And then I was like getting more and more interested into it. And then it came to a point where when I was doing my master's, I did my master's on Shirin Nishat's photography and video work. And now I collect photographs and prints.
That's so funny. It's sometimes when you're forced to understand something, then you go, okay, now I get it.
Yeah, because my professor at that time knew I hated photography and stuff like that. She's like, why don't you write a paper on her? And I bet you'll change your mind.
That's a good professor.
Yeah. I still keep in touch with her. She's fantastic.
That's amazing.
But it was her who actually really pushed me.
Yeah, and she saw that you would like it if you spent time with it. And
so keep an open mind.
Yes, exactly.
Before we finish on the topic of the Met, what are you working on now that you're like excited about or that you can tell us about?
I mean, I'm excited about it. I don't know how interesting this will be to others, but even though I have been overseeing the ephemera and visual culture collection since 2015, I mentioned I was in the study room managing that space where people can come in and make appointments to see works in our collection. I was doing that for a long time, and it was a great position, but it didn't allow for a lot of flexibility. I wasn't able to like go into our storeroom and really like dig into the collection that much. So that's what I want to do now is, as I mentioned, we have hundreds of thousands of items, and I just want to spend time with the works and see if ideas are sparked just looking and reading. And we have a collection of British trade cards, which are kind of like the British version of like American baseball cards coming in as a new acquisition. There are 60,000 of them that are coming in the fall.
It's crazy.
And so I'm really excited to dig into that and see what kind of stories we can tell about, like propaganda and war and, the stories that are told to kids through these types of cards about, nationalism and pride in one's, those kinds of things. I like scrutinizing that and those kinds of objects. And I don't have any exhibitions on the calendar at the moment, but I have a lot of ideas. And so
brewing.
They're brewing. Stay tuned.
Okay, good. What's your favorite thing about the Met as a museum? Just apart from your prints and drawings department.
Okay.
Like when you walk in there, you're like, I'm so excited to be here because this is what I love about the Met.
I think, this is hard to articulate, but I think something that I love about the Met, having gotten to know it so well after so many years as a staff member, is that it's both so grand and impressive, but at the same time, it's kind of like idiosyncratic. It's kind of, there are so many unexpected things. I mean, it's this building that's grown over 150, however many years, to look like what it is today in a kind of piecemeal way.
Yeah.
It's nothing about it is streamlined or clean or, if someone were to just create an encyclopedic collection like the Met from scratch today, it would not look like the Met.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't. And I love that the building and the collection and the way one experiences the Met walking through it tells the story of the Met, not just of world culture.
Yeah.
I love that. It's like such a unique place that could never be replicated anywhere else. And to me, that makes it really special. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. The Met, I mean, and I encourage everybody to look into this, has had such an interesting history as an institution from the start to where it is now.
Yes. There was a great exhibition a few years ago called Making the Met.
Oh, okay.
And the exhibition catalog is fabulous. So,
okay, I have to look into that.
Yeah, it's
because I'm really fascinated by the history of the museum.
Yeah,
so
it's fascinating.
Okay, so let's backtrack now.
Okay.
Let's start with your education.
Sure.
With your undergrad.
Yeah.
Because you went to the Connecticut College.
Mhm.
And what did you major in?
I majored in art history.
Of course.
no
Okay.
surprise there.
Yeah.
Connecticut College is a small liberal arts school. They have a great art history program.
Mhm.
And it's one of the reasons that I wanted to go there, actually, because I was interested in art history in high school.
Okay. So you knew early on that this was it for you.
I mean, I had a good feeling. I really liked art,
Mhm.
but I wasn't good enough at making it, and I also didn't really have the patience. I mean, I admire artists so much because like I just don't have the temperament to like be in the studio and like just make art for hours. That's just not me. But I wanted to be around it, and I grew up in New York around museums. I've had that privilege, so I knew I wanted to work in a museum.
Yeah.
I did. I went to college, and they, in addition to having a art history program, they also have a museum study certificate program where there are classes offered specifically in museum studies, which was quite rare and really made an impact on me.
Yeah, especially since you knew you wanted to go into the museum field of art. After you graduated, did you go straight to get your master's, or did you do some internships?
I took a year off in between. That was when I interned at the Whitney. For like that kind of academic year, part-time. I was a tour guide at Lincoln Center. I found that job listing on Craigslist.
Wow, Craigslist.
This was 2009.
Okay. Yeah, I remember when I was like early on in my career where you could find jobs on Craigslist. Now it's just very shady land of weird things.
I think it's different. I mean, Lincoln Center was posting jobs on Craigslist.
Okay. Fun fact.
For what it's worth. And I spent a lot of time like looking into grad school programs that year. And I also just did, I was a hostess at a restaurant. I did a lot of babysitting. Like I just I cobbled things together while trying to keep my foot in the art world at the same time. Yeah.
And then you got a master's in philosophy.
Yes, an MPhil.
How did we get there?
So at the CUNY Grad Center, I actually entered the program. I entered a PhD program without a master's, which was a option then for the art history program. Then it's not very common, I don't think, when it comes to PhD programs in art history in the States. And so I essentially got what was equivalent to a master's degree, and through taking 4 years of coursework and then also taking language exams and several other exams. So the exams included, the degree they offer is an MPhil rather than a master's. And I'm ABD. I'm all but dissertation at this point. So I'm still in the program many, 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 many years later, trying to finish my dissertation.
For those who want to go the PhD route,
keep in mind, it's a marathon, not
a sprint for sure.
As many professors have told me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So would you say, because you're obviously in the midst of doing your PhD, would you say that a PhD is essential to having a curatorial job in the arts?
Not across the board necessarily, but I do think I wouldn't have gotten my position as a curator at the Met had I not been at least enrolled in a PhD program and pretty far along at that point. And that's the Met. And it also depends on what your field is, what kind of works you oversee. I see in general that it's less it's not required as frequently for curators of modern and contemporary, and especially contemporary art, but more often required for curators of, pre-1900, for example.
Yeah.
But it also, again, it depends on the institution too. Some institutions are more kind of research, scholarship focused than others.
Yeah.
So I think if one had their heart set on being a curator at the Met, it's a good idea to do.
Okay.
But it's not the case everywhere.
Okay.
So.
Maybe the PhD just sort of prepares you for what the research will be like when you're a curator at the museum.
Yeah. I mean, even though I don't have the degree in hand, I've had years and years and years of being, in grad school, and definitely do draw on the research skills I've learned through school all the time.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned you were an intern at the Whitney. What position, what department were you working
I was in curatorial.
Okay.
So I had a funny kind of situation where the summer of 2009, when right after I graduated from college, I applied for several museum internships, and I'll tell you more about this in a moment, but I was accepted to both the Met and the Whitney. This is after many, many, many rejections.
Okay.
So this isn't just I just applied and I got in everything. Not at all.
Yeah.
But that was still insane. And so I had this choice to make. I'll be honest, the Met internship was paid, and at the time the Whitney internship was not.
Back in the days when no one was getting paid for being an intern.
It was these are two amazing institutions and amazing opportunities. I'll let this be the thing that decides. So I went with the Met, but I emailed the person who would have been my supervisor for the summer internship and was like, this is an amazing opportunity that I don't want to just let go and slip through my fingertips. Is there, I don't know if I asked if there was a possibility to do an internship during the academic year or if she suggested that, but that's what ended up happening. So it was 2 days a week, unpaid, which is why I was doing all these funky jobs on the side.
You gotta survive. It's New York.
Survive. So that was in curatorial for a year. I worked on an exhibition towards the tail end of the organization of this exhibition, doing research, reviewing the manuscript for the catalog. It was fabulous. I loved working there. Yeah.
Okay.
Interning there. Yeah.
Okay. So then after when did you do the internship in the Education and Development Department at the Lynn Allen Art Museum?
Yeah, at the Lyman Allen. So the Lyman Allen Art Museum is neighbors with Connecticut College's campus, right there. And so I did that internship throughout my time in college as an undergrad. I can't remember exactly what years, but it's a very small museum with a very, very small staff. And so the interns, when I was there, at least at that time, would just kind of help out with whatever was needed, which is why I was in development and education. On the weekends, I led kids' birthday parties at the museum.
Okay.
So really all hands on deck.
Yeah. That's what you get for when you have a small team.
Yes. Yeah. That was a great experience for that reason. I got to see so many different sides of how a small museum operates.
Yeah.
So
you did that while you were still in school.
Yes.
Then you obviously did the internship at the Met and the Whitney. And then you went on to become an archivist and office manager / sales coordinator at Harlan and Weaver.
Those are positions I kind of job titles I made up.
Because you were doing everything.
Because it was this big of a team. And
How did you get there?
Yeah. Oh, I loved it there. So that was through my supervisor at the Met, my internship supervisor.
Okay.
So I mentioned that when I was an intern at the Met that summer of 2009, my supervisor was the curator of modern and contemporary prints. And when the internship ended and I was embarking on this, what ended up being a year of, kind of transitioning between college and grad school. I didn't know how long it would be at the time. I stayed in touch with the curator and I asked her if there were any job openings at the Met or to keep me in mind for job openings at the Met. And
You really didn't want to leave the Met.
I mean, it's the Met.
It is.
And it was like it was also at the Whitney. I'm sure I asked my supervisor at the Whitney too. And Samantha at the Met, she said, there's nothing open right now. However, I just got an email from this wonderful print shop, Harlan and Weaver, asking if I knew of anyone who would be appropriate for this position. And Harlan and Weaver is a printer and publisher, a print publisher, and they also do the printing. It's a print shop. And they worked for many years with Louise Bourgeois.
Oh my God, I love her.
Many years. I love her too.
I every time somebody talks about her, I'm like, I swear she's my art soulmate.
Yes, doesn't she
there's something about her, like she just
like if you
stays with you.
Yes,
Yeah.
like she sees inside your soul kind of thing. Totally. Yes, 100%. I feel like that.
Yeah, you get it.
Yeah, exactly. Like now we're bonded.
Yeah.
So the most magnificent opportunity came up because they were looking. So this was right after she died at 99 years old.
Yeah,
100 and something. And they were looking for someone with an art history background, but young enough that, kind of early career to come in and archive. I say this in quotes because it was a little bit of a you figure out what that means when you get here. Archive her what we call state proofs. So in printmaking, you imagine you're at the printing press, and before you get to that point, Louise Bourgeois, she would work on her prints using copper plates. And it's hard to sometimes see what you're doing on the copper plate, how the image is going to come out before you ink it and then roll it through the press with paper. So they would, before they edition, they would pull an impression of a print, and she would see what the image looked like on paper and go, let's make some changes. She'd take highlighter, she'd take white out, she'd take a Sharpie, and she'd just draw on the sheet of paper to indicate what kind of changes she wanted to make for the final print. And they had and that's what's called a state proof. It's in the process of, not a kind of completed final print that you would sell. And they had.
Is there a difference between the state proof and an artist proof?
So an artist proof is part of the final edition, and it's one of the impressions that the artist gets to keep if they're making it with master printers at a shop.
Okay.
So that's a final version of the print, if that makes sense. Anyway, so there were all of these state proofs lying around that were beautiful and amazing, and they were all going to MoMA's collection, and so they brought me in to inventory them essentially. I mean, I did it on Excel, and it was a way for me to work with one of the master printers, Felix Harlan, who worked very closely with Louise Bourgeois in her home in Chelsea at a little press.
At some point when she was older, she would never leave that home. You had to go to her.
That's what he did.
Yep.
That's what he did. Exactly. He would go work on the press in her basement. Just amazing. It gives me chills just talking about it. And the idea was so that, when all of these state proofs went to MoMA, they would have a record of what everything was, when it was made, what the order of the proofs were. And Felix was the only person on earth who knew any of this. You know what I mean? He had that knowledge. So they wanted to make sure to get it in writing. So I started doing that. And then I can't remember the exact sequence of events, but eventually somehow, with some staff turnover and things like that, I ended up becoming the bookkeeper, and I would, work at the art fairs, the IFPDA print fair in New York, and some others, selling prints at the booths. And I basically ran the office. Did office work. The way I like to put it is I was the only person who worked there who was not a printmaker and not an artist. I was the person who was there because I loved it.
You were the glue holding everything together.
Yeah, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
And it was an incredible experience that I really attribute with that's the thing that I attribute to why I'm still doing what I'm doing and why I'm working with prints.
So what was one of your favorite things about the job?
It was so cool. Working on what I was doing while like Stanley Whitney or Nicole Eisenman was right over there making a print. Like
Wow.
in this small little
Yeah.
setting, like a small studio. There were, I think, like 5 of us who worked there maybe on any given day, maybe 4, maybe 5. And the artists were right there. Like I never experienced that before.
Yeah.
And then we would stop in the middle of the day for lunch and we'd all eat lunch together. And it was magic. It was, and I got to see how a print was made.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is great. Like this is this like, it felt like this like ancient, like traditional process that these genius artists love. Like there must be something there that's special about this. Like why are people still making prints using copper plates and acid baths and things? Like it's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. So there must be something special about it. Yeah.
I remember I took a field trip when I was doing my master's to a printmaking shop, and they showed us actually how to make a print from limestone.
Oh, like
Yeah.
a lithograph?
Yeah,
Oh,
like a
how
lithograph.
cool. Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is crazy.
It's crazy. I can't explain.
Yeah,
how
you have to
lithographs
just
made. It's
experience
like,
it. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really like multifaceted processes that master printers, they have that knowledge. And it's a craft. It's a skill that it takes years and years and years to hone.
Yeah. And you can definitely tell, once you start like either collecting prints or being around prints, the quality of the print, and then who's a real craftsman, who's just like doing shoddy jobs that are just like, oh, here's an addition, whatever. Yeah, you can
totally
definitely
tell the
tell.
difference 100%. And I think it also takes, it's like personality too.
Yeah.
The artist has to kind of jive with the master printer. There's
Yeah.
conversations that happen, and it was kind of a revelation to me too to see like, okay, well, this print's being made by Nicole Eisenman and going to be for sale at the fair in 6 months, and we'll have Nicole's name attached to it. But there was all this that happened behind the scenes with Carol and Felix and the other printers in the shop who, it's a collaboration.
Yeah.
And the artist will talk about that, and it's so different than an artist being alone in the studio painting, for example. So I just thought there's more. This is something that should be considered and told as part of the history and the story of these prints. So as an art historian, that was something I always I still think about.
Yeah, 100%. Because I mean, artists by trade, some of them aren't like fabricators or like printmakers. So they'll go and seek professionals out or craftsmen who have been doing this for years to show them like, this is what I want to do. Can you show me how to get there?
Exactly.
Yeah. So they rely on that knowledge.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what was one of the biggest challenges of that job?
Oh my God. Sometimes I felt like I didn't know what I was doing.
Okay. I think that's everybody at any job, honestly.
I mean, it was like, fresh out of college. I was, as I mentioned, doing their bookkeeping. I probably shouldn't have been.
I don't think anyone in the art world should be doing bookkeeping. I'm just going to say that.
Looking back, I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
I just said yes to everything, which I think in general, for the most part, was a good thing. And in certain cases, maybe, I mean, in this job, I probably could have I should have probably asked more questions. And, there were instances where I did feel like out of my depths a little bit, but it was all new to me.
Yeah.
It was all new to me. And everything you learn is you learn through experience. And I didn't have much experience at that point. So it felt like, thinking back, I'm like, oh, I was a baby then. You know? So a lot was challenging. And if I could talk to myself then, I would just be like, everything will be okay. Take a deep breath.
And I'm sure you must have gotten like invaluable knowledge that you've now carried over into your current job at the Met, like learning all this stuff and seeing it.
I still pinch myself that I had that experience, and I'm still close with with Felix, Harlan. We raised Felix Harlan and the staff there, and it still feels like home, even though I haven't worked there in how many years. Yeah.
So it was after this job that you moved on to the Met.
Yes.
And you were like, okay, hire me.
Yes.
So how long were you at Harlan before you switched to the Met?
So I was at Harlan and Weaver really just for, like 2.5 years. It was part-time. Like, it wasn't, in terms of time spent, it was kind of like a blip, but in terms of its impact, it was major, you know? So I was there, like 2010 to 2012-ish, I think. And summer of 2012, I was working there 3 days a week. And then as a volunteer intern at the Met twice a week. And then at the end of that summer, that's when I was hired at the Met as a research assistant and had to say goodbye to Harlan and Weaver. I know, it was hard.
Well, you're on to different and
they were
new
like,
things.
well, it's the Met. You know, they were like, they loved the drawings and prints department there. They had so a good relationship. And so
I can
it felt
imagine.
So
before we head into the fire round questions, I wanted to ask you, what would be the advice, besides keeping an open mind, that you would give to listeners or women who are coming into the field who want to be curators at the Met?
Yeah. I mean, the open mind thing is a big one. I mean, just to kind of elaborate on that a bit, I think just through observation, what I have found is those, like the people I know who have, I think, found success in like fulfilling careers in the arts are those that have not had a very narrow vision of what their career would look like from the beginning and only chased that, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So if you want to be, curator of, of painting at MoMA and that's it, whatever, and you're really just set on that very specific circumscribed goal, I feel like that, I don't know, when I see people with a very kind of narrow view of what they want to do, I feel like it's hard to, it's a competitive field.
Yeah, 100%.
It's hard to achieve these things. And so those, I think, who are more open to hurdles and swerves and, bumps in the road, and think and approach those things as opportunities rather than, like negative circumstances, are the ones I find to be often more successful. I mean, for me, like we've talked about, I knew nothing about prints. I could care less about prints. And now I think the fact that I didn't take to them when I was younger actually has become a strength for me, because I feel like I can kind of see both sides. I understand their value, but I also understand someone who doesn't know what their value is. And so I can, so thinking about those kinds of challenges as actually opportunities. And again, not being narrow-minded about one's career. Staying in touch.
Yeah, relationship building.
Everyone says this, but it's so huge. It's huge. If you click with someone that you work with, whether it be a mentor or a colleague or someone you met, at an opening one night, it's all about relationships. But it's true. Like, when like a position comes up and suddenly you're in a position where you're on that side where you're actually doing the hiring, you'll think about the people who you know, who you know, and who
of
you
course,
like,
exactly,
and who have shown an interest and who have shown passion, and so sending those emails, hey, hope all's well, just wanted to say hello, or a text or whatever. Just you're not a nag. It's what you're supposed to do.
Exactly.
You're not. Don't feel like you're nagging. And don't apologize for it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with receiving an email from someone that just says, "Hey, just hope you had a good holiday. Hope to see you soon." Just keeping yourself at the top of people's minds. I think
100%.
Right?
I completely agree.
Yeah.
One more question. So how do I phrase this? As a woman in the field, have there been any particular challenges that you faced, or have you had like women mentors that you were very pivotal to getting you where you are today?
I have to be honest. It's been basically all women who I feel like have been pivotal. I mean, I have one friend who's been great. Who's a guy. I'll give him that. But no, I mean, it's been women almost entirely for me, who have been the ones to support me, spend the time actually getting coffees and showing an interest and asking questions and doing that kind of, that stuff that really supports someone in their career. And I think there's something to that so many of us as women experience in whatever career we're in, that, I mean, it's a confidence thing.
Yeah.
I mean, this is obviously something that's like talked about all the time. Not apologizing all the time, saying sorry for everything you do.
100% agree.
Feeling confident enough to raise your hand in a meeting first. All those things, I think we see that. We all experience and we see it in each other. And I've really benefited from other women who have had those experiences themselves and are generous and kind enough to kind of help give me the confidence to break through that too. Do you know what I mean? I feel like it's
100%.
Past, we're all, it's something we can pass down to younger generations, and there's a kind of like network of women at play that is very special.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I mean, when I was younger and just starting out in the art industry, like, you don't want to like ruffle feathers, or you don't want to really speak up, and you don't really have that confidence until you really get to a certain level, which is fair. But, don't be scared like early on to like really speak your voice, because whatever you have to say is important.
Completely. And there will always be people who, if you do speak up and you're not the most experienced person in the world, there might be people in the room who like roll their eyes or go, oh, they haven't earned this.
Who cares?
Who cares?
Exactly.
Who cares about them?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just like try to, ignore those people.
Yeah.
And have confidence in your ideas. Everyone has something different to bring to the table.
Yeah.
Everyone has a different perspective. And I just think, imposter syndrome is very much a gendered thing.
100%.
And no one knows what they're doing.
No. Listen, we all start and we're like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do now?
Yeah.
And you figure it out.
And if you don't know, just ask. Like,
exactly. Ask for help.
Everyone has been new to a job at some point in their lives. Like, it's just like, it's scary starting a new job and starting a career, but everyone's been there and everyone can relate. I just, I wish at the beginning of my career, I wasn't so like terrified of everything.
Yeah.
I mean,
same.
it's hard, but right? Like, like, oh my God, all these people who've been doing this for so long.
I was literally scared of everything. I'm like,
like,
don't ask, figure it out yourself.
Yeah. Just, I think asking questions and just like, and people, there are plenty of people out there who will want to help.
Oh yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Don't be scared to ask a question. Like there's never a stupid question. Like if you don't know how to do something, ask, and there will be somebody who will help you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it's time to head into the fire round of questions.
I'm nervous. Okay.
So you can pick a number from 1 to 10, and then I'll read the corresponding question.
Okay.
Pick your favorite number.
8.
8. Okay. What's a book you read that you didn't want to end, or that really had an influence on you?
Oh my gosh.
It doesn't have to be art related.
It's actually like easy for me because it's like my favorite. It's part of the Elena Ferrante series. The first book is called My Brilliant Friend.
Okay, I've never read it. Book? No. But this is where I get my good book ideas when I ask my guests about it.
It's so good. I really feel I read it years ago. There's a series of 4, and I don't know if it's called My Brilliant Friend series or what. It's translated from Italian into English. Elena Ferrante is a pseudonym. No one knows who the real author is. And even in translation, the writing is so exquisite and the story so like, it's just like unlike anything I've ever read. And I don't think I've read a novel since that I've loved as much.
Okay.
It's just
what is it about?
So it's really about a friendship between 2 women from the time that they're, kids, like 5-6 years old, until they're older, elderly women, or maybe not elderly, but older. And they grow up in Naples or near Naples, and you get a sense of like, the kind of social context around Italy for these several like post-war to whenever it ends, the 70s or 80s. But the relationship between them and their friends and their families so real.
Yeah.
And the pacing is not consistent. So like there will be like pages and pages and pages of just like slow, and then suddenly it will speed up. And it's just so unpredictable, I think, is what I love about it. There's no cliches. Nothing's cliche. It's all surprising. And it just like gets to like, you really kind of gets to, it evokes like the feeling of friendship in a way that nothing else I've read does. It's beautiful.
Okay, I want to read this.
I'm like, I hope you like it.
Yes, this is definitely something I want to read. But also, why did none of my former Italian coworkers tell me about this book?
I was
Like,
told by a
guys.
friend. Yeah, really.
But thank you for telling me. Now I'm gonna look into it because that sounds really like something I'd really
I'm
enjoy
really glad
reading.
I got that question. I was nervous. I was like,
No, you got a good one.
answer everyone,
Well,
but-
there's two more. So
Oh no. Never mind.
Okay.
Spoke too soon.
yeah. So pick another number.
3.
3. If you could talk to anyone dead or alive, who would it be and why?
This is hard.
You were probably dreading this question.
Oh no. Oh my God, that's so hard. I could talk to anyone. This is maybe a little like self-centered.
Go for it.
But I feel like one of my, like a great grandmother,
That would be amazing.
right? Like someone.
I never even thought of that. Yeah, like in your lineage.
in my lineage.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like when it comes to like famous people, I
Yeah.
can't. I mean, I don't know if there's a million, but
But can
that
you
I would
imagine
choose, but,
what
like,
she would tell you?
wouldn't that be so interesting?
That would be really
Someone,
interesting.
you know, like a ancestor, a woman ancestor, and like who was around just like, I don't know, in like 1850 or
Yeah.
something.
I mean, their lives were completely different from ours.
I think that would be mine.
That would be really fun.
That just came to me. I don't know why.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good
thank you.
answer. I like it.
Okay, good.
Okay, last question.
Oh,
you
I
have to pick a
number.
number.
Sorry. I'm like, yes.
You-
Oh my
you're
God. 5.
Okay, 5. What is one thing you're sick of hearing? I'm sure there's loads.
What is one thing I'm sick of hearing? Oh my gosh. That's hard.
Yeah.
Any examples of
We can do another question
Let's
if you're
do
like
another one.
Okay, pick another number because that one is hard and a lot of people like
hard. I mean, there's so many things, but
Yeah.
like nothing specific comes to mind.
Okay,
Let's do
but-
6.
6. What is a piece of art that you own that you would never sell or one that is your favorite?
Oh, that is a good one. So most of the art that I own is by friends,
Okay.
which is very special. I don't have a lot, but all of it's very meaningful. So I would say there's one that I acquired recently by a friend named Rachel Ostro.
Okay.
Shout out Rachel. She's amazing. She is a printmaker. I met her through Harlan and Weaver. We
Okay.
didn't work there at the same time, but it's a big family there. So everyone who's ever worked there knows each other basically. And she makes these really beautiful, they're called mono prints. So like just single prints using this kind of, I mean, it's a technique that I can't even describe, but they're like these little beautiful gems of like glowing abstract shapes that take on, like each one is so different and individual, but she does them as a series.
Mhm.
And it's hard for me to describe why I love them so much, but they just like,
So we have to look them up, guys.
they're so beautiful. She's incredible. And she started off as doing these paintings using this technique and now is making these monotypes and they're like just jewel-like.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a recent acquisition that I'm excited to have in my collection forever.
Now I have to look it up because I mean I collect prints. So
Yes. Oh, you absolutely
yeah.
should.
Okay.
They're beautiful.
I'll look up her work because I haven't heard of her before.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
So thank you for sharing that. Okay, well, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story, for giving us your advice. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. This is a lot of fun.
To all my viewers, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this episode and I will see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.